the art market and visual arts as a whole is like Hollywood, or it's like Bundesliga, if you will. You know, there are a lot of people who play football in Germany, but there are very few who play in the Bundesliga.
The global art market is worth $65 billion, a market of extremes. Moconomy investigates, why is the art market so opaque? How are prices set? How do auction houses and galleries operate? What about the gender and equal pay gap? Why is art so attractive as an investment? What is the future of digitalization in the art market? Moconomy dives into the mechanisms of the global art industry from the perspective of the German art market. The glamorous world of an artist fascinates and inspires us, with their biographies, innovations, rebellions, alternative lifestyles, creativity, and unique works of art. But what remains once the glamour is deconstructed?
It's always been the people with money that affected the art world, unfortunately, because without that, there's no market and there's no artist.
Art is above all a business in the hands of a few players. But how does the art market really work? The business is booming. In 2023, the global art market was valued at $65 billion. The year before, it was worth $67.8 billion, the second highest figure ever recorded for the global market. This is because the wealth of the world's billionaires has grown to $13.7 trillion in 2023. This wealth has a significant impact on the top end of the art market.
The commercial art markets are great indicators of economic trends, economic developments. Which companies have money, which companies are educated, which companies are interested in art and buy art.
Despite increased purchasing power on the art market, many artists, especially women, people of color, and queer artists, live and work under precarious circumstances. The situation is similarly bad, at least in the Western and American art markets. I think Germany is third from the bottom in a European comparison. But this gender pay gap of 18% in Germany and around 30% in the performing arts is not just a European problem, it's a global problem. To understand this contradiction, let's look at the mechanics of the art market. Today, the art trade is perceived as opaque and inaccessible. Nevertheless, people remain fascinated. Digitalization is rapidly developing, accelerating social and cultural insecurities in our society. The top 3 art markets in the world today are the US, the UK, and China. The US is the absolute leader, accounting for 42% of sales. The Chinese market is the second largest in the world with a share of 19%, followed by the UK with a share of 17%. The remaining 20% of the global art market is shared by the other 192 countries of the world.
So my name is Amelie von Wedel. I'm an art advisor. I have an art advisory company in London. In the commercial art world, you have auction houses, galleries, you have dealers, and you have art advisors. I think that's probably the sort of 4 main categories.
This strict hierarchical system creates a huge gender pay gap.
Geld sind Möglichkeiten. Geld ist Teilhabe.
The market grows through multi-million-dollar auctions, where artwork is traded as an investment by only a handful of the super rich. Meanwhile, the artists struggle at the other end of the food chain.
This is a very old ecosystem, and it's sort of slightly established on sort of gentleman rules. And I think now everything is sort of shifting and nothing is as clear-cut as it used to be anymore. The art world is growing year by year. I think you've got now in total more than 2 million artists. It's a very opaque, it's not a transparent art world.
Since the 1990s, the international art trade has been in a process of industrialization. With the acceleration of digitalization during the COVID-19 pandemic, online-based business models have also become more visible in the mainstream. This includes online auction houses in the low-price segment, NFT marketplaces, and artists selling directly to buyers via Instagram. The growth of online commerce is one of the most significant developments in the art market in recent years.
My name is Konstanze Wolter. I'm an art dealer for over 14 years now, and I'm the founder of eartist.com, an online auction house. We are getting artworks from private collections or from estates, and we sell it in auction sales only specifically online. Traditional auction houses are focusing on high-end artworks in a very high price range. So this is what makes sense economically. So not to forget, out there is a large amount of artworks lower that level, below 1,000 euro. And this is exactly what we target as well as artworks, because that fits our philosophy that art should be more accessible to a wide range of people.
Around $11 billion were generated through online sales.
My name is Dirk
Boll. I'm on the board of the 20th and 21st Century Art at Christie's in London. What we have seen during the pandemic is that the commercial distribution of art has become very much digitalized, by necessity. This means that there is now a higher proportion of digital distribution for the traditional suppliers, the gallery system, the art trade, the auctions. At the same time, artists have increasingly offered their objects and artworks directly during the pandemic through their own websites, but especially through social media.
There is now a rule that as an artist you can contribute from the secondary market, or you can benefit from the secondary market, but it's capped at a certain value.
The secondary market, or resale market, deals in works of art that are part of a collection from a private individual, gallery, or museum. When their work is resold, artists do not receive a cut of the sale.
The boundary between the primary and secondary markets has shifted dramatically over the last 20 years. On the one hand, the time gap between the two markets has narrowed. In the late 20th century, it took 10 to 20 years to get from the primary to the secondary market. This period has been steadily shrinking. Today, you can find very fresh works on the secondary market, the famous wet canvas. At the same time, it has been said that the way sellers work has changed, especially in the gallery system, which now also does a lot of secondary marketing of its own artists' work.
In most cases, works by deceased artists are the main objects traded on the secondary market.
My name is Zoe Claire Miller, and I am an artist and organizer. I'm based in Berlin, Germany, and I also am one of the spokespeople of the BBK Berlin, which is the Professional Association of Visual Artists.
Active artists sell their art mostly through the primary market. Several factors, such as the artist's fame and relevance, but also gender, class and ethnicity, influence prices in this market. In Germany, female visual artists earn on average 28% less than their male colleagues. The average annual income is €10,500. The gender pay gap is 7%, and 90% of female artists face poverty in old age, with an expected pension of €357 per month.
One can definitely notice that the situation is shifting, that a lot of museums and collections are hurriedly thinking like, oh, wait, we need to show actually also some women or some people of color. It's still straight white men, straight old white men, usually that have the highest prices, that set the record prices, that sell the most, that have the highest representation at fairs, have the most solo shows in museums. So this is still definitely quite dominant.
In Germany, the so-called gender show gap varies from one institution to another. This refers to the number of works by women that can be seen in exhibitions, museums, collections or fairs. At the Hamburger Bahnhof in Berlin, only 28% of solo exhibitions between 2015 and 2019 were by women. This has now evened out. In addition to gender, skin color also plays a role.
A lot of it has happened, I think, already in the last years. And I think you still have American museum collections that are probably 80% male. But there's such a push in terms of museums buying female artists, buying artists from sort of marginalized groups. It's also very political driven. And I think that is reflected in the art market, and I think this trend will only continue. And I think there's no way back. And, you know, for example, and it's really reflected also now in the sort of traditional, for example, I don't know, Christie's evening sale in New York last May had more female artists than male artists. And that's completely new. And so I think all of that, this will, I think, become more democratic.
Gerade in der Kunstwelt ist es so, dass
In the art world in particular, there are many more women than men. But there is also the pyramid, where it is mainly men who make a career in the middle sector.
Mittelbereich vor allen Dingen Männer Karriere machen. Das hat vielerlei Gründe.
There are many reasons for this, because this has been perceived as the right model for centuries, because for a very long time there was a lack of role models for successful women. But of course there are also social reasons, such as the fact that women can have children and men, unfortunately, cannot. These are all elements that have had an impact at mid-career.
In einer mittleren Karrierephase.
I think it's because we simply have a very male, patriarchal art elite that still dominates the art market, or has dominated the art market over the last few decades, and probably still does. So when we think of a museum director, when we think of a gallery owner, but also who does what, who teaches, and on the other hand, of course, who is also active in the important press organs, who is the editor-in-chief? We now have some amazing female artists who are also very, very successful. For example, Katharina Grosser, whose artworks sell for around $600,000. I believe the currently most expensive living contemporary female artist is Jenny Saville, with one of her artworks selling for $10 million. However, this is on the secondary market. While that sounds like a lot of money, if you compare it to the price of a Jeff Koons piece, which can cost $80 million, it's clear that there's still quite a disparity. Sotheby's, the industry leader, published a report in 2023 that summarizes its own global sales figures as well as those of the auction houses Christie's and Phillips. According to the report, sales by female artists in the $1 million plus segment have more than doubled in 5 years, from just under $222 million to nearly $462 million.
Well, I think that both extremes are kind of an unrealistic, romantic vision. An artist is self-employed, is a freelancer, so like all other self-employed people, an artist has to think about financial aspects and business aspects if they want to be able to survive off of their art, if, you know, they aren't rich heirs to a huge family fortune that means they don't ever have to earn money in their life. So yeah, in terms of needing to consider money and profit and income, every artist has to be a business person to some degree.
In order to succeed as an artist and small business owner, artists need to overcome individual market barriers. These can be grants, prizes, exhibitions in relevant museums, but also sufficient reach on Instagram.
The market is now so large, it can absorb a lot more artists. And I think also, of course, there's now lots of different ways how you can sell your art. You can also digitally now, as an artist, you can reach your audience in lots of different ways. But I think the predominant factor, I think, is the sort of increase of wealth in the world. And I think more and more people aspire to having an original artwork on their wall.
The prices of world-famous artworks are set on the top end of the secondary market by the leading auction houses and realized with the money of the world's richest people.
My name is Daniel van Schacky. I'm the managing partner of Griesebach, which is one of the leading auction houses in Germany for modern and contemporary art. The auction system is particularly important for the resale part of the market because it's the most efficient way of reselling artwork. Auctions as a whole have an extremely important role in the art market in terms of creating price transparency and price information, because it's otherwise very difficult to find price information about what artworks are selling for. And the auction is really the only fully transparent and publicly available information about that. So that's why it fulfills a very important role within the whole ecosystem.
Auction houses and galleries are two key intermediaries in the traditional art market. They are there to ensure quality and attract potential buyers.
As a gallery, you present the artists that you work with, and that's basically what you have to sell. It's a beautiful thing, and it's a very rewarding thing to work with artists, but that's sort of what you have to sell. And sometimes they might make work you like, sometimes they might make work that's not that great, but of course you have to sell it, it's your job. And as an auction house, you're sort of limited to what you manage to get on consignment, while as an art advisor, you have complete freedom. We can sort of roam the world and just sort of try and look for what we really believe in for, of course, different kind of reasons, and then try and find a good home for that artwork.
Most commercial art galleries are small businesses, both in terms of employment and revenue. In addition to the small galleries, a new type of gallery has emerged, the so-called mega gallery. These are industry-leading galleries with multiple global locations that are sized to the standards of a large museum. This blurs the boundary between what is considered a gallery and what a museum. Because of this, museums are losing their influence as the main institutions of art, as well as the main tastemakers for quality control in art. The largest mega gallery is owned by Larry Gagosian, the world-renowned Gagosian Gallery. It is actually a global empire comprising 17 gallery locations around the world. Gagosian deals exclusively with contemporary art in the top segment. The total annual revenue of this empire is approximately $1 billion.
The big gallery is just becoming bigger and bigger, and the smaller galleries struggling, and the medium-sized galleries. And I think that to have that diversity of different commercial places to sell art is important, and hopefully we can somehow keep those different places.
Galleries are closed systems. This system is made accessible to collectors in the traditional art market by art advisors.
If you look at the statistics, I think there's supposed to be more millionaires in 2026, or 40%, I think, more millionaires in 2026 than this year. And and more people, I think, look at buying art.
34 million, 35 million, in the room at 36 million, $37 million, it's in a new place. I have $37 million now on the telephone at 37 million. I have $37 million here on the telephone.
There are different reasons why you collect. I think there's, you do it maybe for a return, to get social capital somehow. It's fun to be part of the art world.
I like to think that the art market is transparent because, in the auction market, you can look everything up. There's data banks where you can look up all the auction sales going back to 1985 or so. You can see all of this sales information, what sold for what price, and so on and so forth. If you look at a gallery business or a private dealing business, this information is not public. It's true, but traditionally, the art market was a very small market. It's a very competitive market too, so people wanted to keep information private to themselves and not shared with other market participants because they felt that there was a profit in it.
The gallery buys directly from artists and then sells their work for a profit. or the gallery takes the work on commission and receives a commission when the work is sold. The artist and the gallery usually agree on the price of the artwork.
The relationship between artist and gallery is a business partnership, and it can be quite different depending on which artist and which gallery. I guess that ideally the situation would be that artists and gallerists enter into a long-term partnership where the gallerist takes care of selling the artist's work but also supports the artist with production, also tries to help the artist be in important shows and biennials, and so functions kind of as also a promoter of the artist's work. Also might help with acquiring funds for them to be able to realize big productions that might be difficult if they didn't have the gallerist support. While the artist is, of course, the producer of the product that the gallery sells. So in those terms, the artist is quite important for the gallerist. In a worst case scenario, an artist is very dependent on a gallerist. There's a very unequal power balance, a strong hierarchy, and the art market, the art world is often one in which business deals are made informally, like more with a handshake. Often people start working together, an artist and a gallery, without a formalized contract. And then this can end up meaning that the party involved in this business partnership that doesn't have the best legal advice can be taken advantage of.
Successful artists sometimes buy back their own early work from galleries, collections, or collectors in order to influence, maintain, or increase the market value or price of their art. Art students and career changers rarely make the leap from university directly into a commercial gallery. As an alternative, they set up their own non-commercial exhibition spaces and studio galleries. In major European cities, such as Berlin, these self-managed spaces are encouraged. Such independent structures or NGO business models give artists a space for visibility as well as publicity. And they are incubators that produce innovations which are later absorbed by the mainstream market and even the secondary market. In addition to sophisticated patronage, technological developments such as blockchain technology offer an opportunity to reduce market barriers and conquer new business areas.
Ich denke, die Zertifizierung von digitaler Kunst durch
I think the certification of digital art through NFTs is an interesting concept, an interesting technology. It's low threshold, which means you don't need a lot of equipment to produce these certificates, so it's very accessible to artists. And it's a good way to make digital art tradable. If you think of NFT technology as a certification technology, the question is when it will extend to the sale of physical artworks. At the same time, we have to recognize that this is not an era of art, but a technology that certifies art. And that means that one day it will be eclipsed by a newer, more up-to-date technology. This is the fate of all technological developments. What is interesting in this area is the liberation of artists from the big support companies that provide such systems, that can provide such services. Because nowadays, almost anyone can do such certification themselves.
Jeder Mann, jeder Frau eine solche Zertifizierung selbst vornehmen kann.
Digital platforms will enable artists to reach other audiences, to communicate with their audiences in a different way, and I think that's a trend. I think it's an exciting trend, and it will take us to a completely different art world. I think now more and more things get sold online that people have never seen, and also people are much more comfortable now to pay buy expensive things online. The digital art market will grow. I think hybrid models will develop of sort of physical exhibitions and the digital exhibition sort of sitting alongside. It's going to enable more people to see artworks that they might not be able to go and see physically. I think it's also going to democratize the market. I think there will also hopefully be more sort of data and I think AI-driven sort of data sets available that's also maybe hopefully going to make the market more transparent and will allow to make better informed decisions.
But the question, what is interesting art? Of course, technology cannot answer this question.
The criteria by which galleries select artists is individual and depends on personal preferences.
Since COVID, we really did a program inviting artists, studios to consign artworks to us directly. This is quite new because we saw that there's a demand at the artists just finding ways to promote and to sell their artworks. And we actually work with artists directly, and all of them appreciate the way of having a fluid and vivid way of selling the artworks.
Hier mit Farbe drauf natürlich hier kostet. Das ist eine Serigraphie von K.R.H.
Excellent relationships with market makers are essential for emerging talent to make their mark on the art market. After all, artists have to convince the industry's major gatekeepers, such as the major auction houses, to make it into the top segment. Those who manage to do so are eventually included in the top 100 highest earning artists in their country. However, the artists do not receive a share of the sales from the traditional auction houses.
The global art market for art at auction is about 35 billion. Last year we did 75 million euros of turnover. So Germany as a whole is 2% of the global market.
The global art auction market generates around $35 billion a year. In 2023, Villa Grisebach generated 50 million euros.
The auction system is particularly important for the resale part of the market because it's the most efficient way of reselling artwork. Private owners come to us and ask us to sell artworks on their behalf, and then we sell them through the auction process, mostly in live auctions, but sometimes also in online auctions.
Auction houses generally claim to offer the very best. The art market worldwide is dominated by a very few leading auction houses.
We only really work in art, so painting, drawing, sculpture, prints. We don't work with furniture, we don't work with jewelry. All these things that are other submarkets we do not do. We only do visual art. We only do 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century.
Most people know how a traditional auction works.
Lot number 7 is next. Property from an important private collection, Los Angeles. So it's in the room at $12 million.
A bid is placed and the highest bidder wins the item.
$26 million. At $26,500,000, fair warning now. Sold. Thank you very much indeed. L0076.
The consigner, the seller, when they come in, they will sign a consignment agreement with us for the upcoming auction, and then we receive a fee of the value, based on the value of the work, so it can slide from the lower the value, the higher the percentage rate. It'll be 18%, let's say, for an item at 1,000 euros. And if it's a higher value item, then the rate goes down. So, you know, for a very high value item, we might receive 5% or so. And then we also receive a so-called buyer's premium, which is the fee that the buyer pays to the auction house. And that's also a fixed percentage rate that they pay on the hammer price, which is the highest bid in the room at the time of the auction.
When a work of art is sold at auction, it is sold with a published estimate. In other words, it is an estimate of what the auction house expects to receive for the work. There is also a reserve price, which is the price at which the owner will allow the work to be sold. This is the reserve or limit, the lowest price at which the work can be bought.
There is more online bidding in the auction sector today than ever before. Sotheby's reports that 91% of bids at its 2022 auctions were placed online. The reason is simple. Top quality art does not fetch such high prices because it is worth so much more. or because they are so much better than the art in the lower segments of the art market, but because there is so much more money circulating in this segment. The museums legitimize these prices by exhibiting this art. In this segment of the market, art becomes an investment for a small number of rich investors.
Some people certainly buy it for pure investment. Most of our clients buy it for pleasure, but like with most things, when you spend a lot of money on something, you do hope that it doesn't lose a lot of value. I think in the last 20 years, there's also been a large influence through globalization, that you have new buyers, many new buyers coming into the market from areas that previously were not connected to this art market.
Today, there are more collectors than famous works of art at auction. But why is investing in art so attractive?
Investment ist tatsächlich ein Kaufmotiv.
Investment is indeed a motive for buying. The motive for buying art is, of course, in most cases, and it must be said, hopefully the love of art, the desire to surround oneself with art.
Mit Kunst umgeben sein.
You always want to be surrounded by art because you want to be able to enjoy works of art without having to go to a museum, in different moods, in different moments of life, light, etc. There are also other reasons for buying art, such as the before-mentioned investment and social prestige. You want to belong to a social group, and art is a way of doing that. You want to impress those around you. You want to park money. So, in addition to investment, which is more geared towards profit and therefore speculation, people see works of art as tangible assets, as money garages. People want to decorate their homes beautifully, which are all further motives for buying art.
Schön dekorieren, das alles sind weitere Motive, Kunst zu kaufen.
Even 2 years ago, you couldn't call art an asset class, and now it's become totally accepted that art is looked at by many people as an asset class. Also, you've now got platforms like Masterworks, which I find totally fascinating. It's basically a platform where they sell fractional ownerships for artwork, so they really treat a painting like a listed public company, and you can buy your share. And also on their website, they compare the S&P and how other asset class have performed in comparison with art, and they make the case that a certain percentage of your portfolio should be invested in art. And they make a very powerful case with this sort of real-time comparison, how well artworks are doing compared to traditional stock market, gold, real estate. In the last banking crisis in 2008, I think art did very well. And it always goes down a little bit with delay if there's a crisis in the world, but it's sort of, it didn't go down that much. Especially sort of A+ top quality works, they were holding their value. And so I think that's also made it more and more interesting that it's sort of proven now over a certain amount of years to be a good place to put your money.
I think not all art always has, over the long term, a stable value. I mean, there are changes in pricing also if you look over time. So if you look at who the most expensive artist in 1850 in Paris was, it was an artist called Bouguereau. 100 years later, you couldn't give his paintings away. Nobody was interested in that art anymore. It does change over time, but generally, like in a shorter time frame, you do have a certain stability, especially if it's artists that are quite well established in the market, because there's just a large market and there's a general interest in these artists.
Investments, money garages, locked art depots, out-of-touch art elites, money laundering, non-transparent galleries. The art market has a dubious, mafia-like, shady image. But what is the real truth in these narratives?
Natürlich gibt es rechtswidrige Praktiken.
Of course, there are illegal practices in the art trade. Every successful distribution system involves something like this. It can be a forgery or counterfeiting of the artwork being traded. It could be the use of an authentic work of art for money laundering or fraud. Anything is possible.
Da ist alles denkbar.
The art market is so intransparent because there's a culture of silence. Almost all serious galleries don't publicly list the prices of artworks, so it's quite hard to determine value. And I mean, of course, value and quality is also totally subjective. Art is very, very frequently used as a way to hide and move dirty money. I mean, you can imagine a Picasso that's worth 10 million and fits into a suitcase is less of a hassle than you know, carrying a suitcase full of diamonds or bars of gold, or having a bank account that, you know, someone might find out that the money there wasn't taxed or was gained through criminal activities. So this also is a factor towards intransparency.
Very few regulations in that sense now for private collectors. I mean, the main, you know, regulations, of course, now and for the past decade or so, we follow all the rules for money laundering and anti-money laundering, which have been tightened up more and more over the last few years, which we spend a lot of time and effort, you know, following these rules and recording all these details that are required. The largest other regulation that pertains to private collectors are the import and export rules for cultural goods, which have been reformed in the last few years in Germany. From a private owner's perspective, the most pertinent regulation.
I think generally it's an unregulated market. I think also famously so, it's probably one of the most intransparent, unregulated market. I think now if you buy a very young, very sought after artist with a long waiting list, the gallery will probably make you sign an invoice that has a 5-year non-resale clause. But again, you know, there's always the debate if those clauses are actually legally enforceable. I think there's sort of more or less zero regulation.
The Cultural Property Protection Act has been in force in Germany since 2015. This law regulates which works of art are allowed to be exported. The German art trade does not like this at all, as much higher prices can be achieved on the world market. By contrast, with little or no legislation, the USA, China, Switzerland, and Singapore seem like paradises. The US, China, and Russia especially rely on tax-friendly art markets.
Der Handel mit Kunst ist
So, of course, the art trade is subject to taxes, which are quite normal business taxes. Works of art are subject to VAT and inheritance tax. There is an import sales tax if art is imported from abroad.
Steuerausland einführt.
In principle, the law applies to works of art as it does to any other commercial goods.
Wie auf jedes andere Handelsgut.
But there are ways around the laws. For example, duty-free warehouses, such as the one in the Free Port of Geneva. Here, neither value-added tax nor customs duties have to be paid. The works of art can be stored there for an indefinite period of time. For the collector, custom duties and taxes are only due when the work of art arrives at its final destination.
There are some storages offering special conditions for people who have interests in international sales without any regulations.
Discretion rules in the art depots. Who stores which works and where remains a trade secret. Galleries are reluctant to reveal what artworks they store. Artists often have to pay for storage themselves. A small individual box of 8 square meters in this Berlin warehouse costs €140 net per month.
People don't like to talk about money because everyone is generally trying to seem like they're very successful, because if artists aren't doing well and speak openly about it, then that has a negative influence on their market success. So if someone knows that a big famous artist at a big gallery didn't sell a single work, that makes all the other potential collectors think like, oh, this isn't the hot shit anymore, we shouldn't buy it either. And the market is also really fragile. Like, for instance, if your prices go down on the secondary market, then that totally messes with the primary market. Say you're a mid-career artist and you've been producing work and selling it for 10 years. One collector bought a lot of your work, and then the collector decides to dump all of that work at auction and they fetch low prices, then that can totally ruin your career, because then basically you can't sell at the price level that you'd been selling at before.
The New York auction houses are considered global market makers. They drive up prices worldwide. The New York galleries are the first to create a market for their artists and emerging talents. The touchstone for whether the newly created market is sustainable are the local auction houses. This means that emerging artists who manage to sell at an auction house but do not achieve good prices are quickly forgotten.
Museums still are the absolute long-term deciders of the fate of an artist's work, and it's not individual collectors. There's various examples where you find that an artist, was extremely successful and popular and pushed, let's say, even by certain private collectors. But if they don't have major museum exhibitions, if they don't have that support from the museums over time, their career and their recognition fades.
The other major players in the art market are the international art fairs. The most important of these is Art Basel. At this superlative event, around 300 galleries from 40 different countries exhibit around 4,000 artists. Art Basel and Art Basel Hong Kong are considered the most expensive art markets in the world. 700 of the world's potentially super-rich international buyers come to buy art at Art Basel. The big question, which of the 4,000 artists exhibited will be bought? What's more, of the 400 of the artists who sell their work successfully at Art Basel, only 40 of them will go on to maintain a successful long-term career. In this artificial system of pricing created by investors and fund managers, it is difficult to determine the real value of a work of art. The difference between price and real value is blurred by the media. This leads to the general assumption that expensive equals valuable.
We sold 2,500 works last year. And the average price was about, let's say, around 30,000 euros. So it's that's, you see, that's kind of the market in Germany too. It tends to be more in the 5 figures, but I think you will find that it's probably not that different around the world actually, because it's just, I think it's just. You have a lot more works that are sub 100,000 than you have works that are above 100,000. And you have a lot more buyers that are below 100,000 and they're above 100,000. So it's just larger numbers.
In art, the value or quality of a work depends on the creative power of the artist. Idea, theme, aesthetics, and technique are the meaningful parameters by which value can be judged. The media-effective staging of auctions and artists, the mystification of the art market by the media, galleries, collectors, and artists themselves contribute to a lack of transparency about the true value of art. Instead, marketing and the image value of individual artists are polished up in order to increase the market value and price of individual works.
You sort of worry if a Joseph Beuys would still be possible today, because it's an artist you need to explain. It's an expensive exhibition to put up. It's not going to attract visitors. Figures probably are not going to be great. And that's just one example of an artist that makes complicated intellectual installations where the sort of meaning is not accessible on the first. It's not love at first sight, probably for most people. And I guess my worry, and there's probably not going to be a way around that, is that art will sell and do well that looks good on a JPEG. I think that will be also just things that are aesthetically pleasing at first sight. I think also the next generation, is leaning towards painting because it's sort of easier to digest. You can imagine easily what it's going to look like on your wall if you just see it on a JPEG. That will definitely, influence the market.
The art market is becoming increasingly fast-paced due to globalization and digitalization.
Digitalisierung bedeutet,
Digitalization means that more people see the same things. It can be consumer goods, it can be works of art, and that leads to a certain homogenization of taste.
Vor allen Dingen bei industriell gefertigten Gütern, das sehen wir aber auch im Kunstmarkt.
In the art market, it also has to do with the fact that digitalization means that we're increasingly guided in our choices by algorithms, reflect our historical taste, i.e., the computer shows us what we liked in the past, where the algorithm can assume that we will like it again, like it, and possibly buy it.
Unseren historischen Geschmack reflektieren. Das heißt, der Computer zeigt uns, was wir in der Vergangenheit mochten.
This means that the presentation of artworks in digital media often means that we are presented with similar things, that we develop a taste that looks rather conservative, because the computer does not, of course, make the discoveries that you make yourself when you visit a graduating class at an art academy or an art fair.
Weil der Computer natürlich nicht die Entdeckungen macht, die man selbst macht, wenn man eine Abschlussklasse in einer Kunstakademie besucht oder eine Kunstmesse.
Newcomers need to move fast, and established companies need sophisticated creative marketing strategies and effective media campaigns to stay visible.
The acceleration of market cycles and the growth of structures naturally require a constant supply of material. This means that as the markets grow, both in terms of structure and demand, they need more and more art. This puts a certain pressure on the system. First of all, of course, on the artists who create the goods that these markets trade in. And here you can see a very clear overfunctioning of the markets, which can bring objects onto the markets that would not have left the studios 10, 20, 30 years ago, because the quality control has become different.
The art market is changing, with a new generation of makers and collectors entering the world stage. The future of the traditional art market will be even more influenced by the digital art market. What will not change are the power structures. Whether online or analog, the market makers of yesterday, today, and tomorrow invest a lot of money and influence the prices on the market. But what are the prospects for newcomers in this hyper-capitalistic art world?
Artists from all around the globe entering the mainstream art market, and I think it's easier now for them to enter the mainstream art market, especially thanks to the digitalization. And I think also history books will have to be rewritten, because you have also all these discovery stories now of of course lots of African American artists, for example, that are now entering American art history that maybe didn't really have the place in the books that they deserve.
And will the cultural discourse of the future be left to super-rich investors and tech giants?
But having said that, American, Chinese, UK, that's still the most important art market, and I think that's not going to change anytime soon.
This means, on the one hand, that we have a strong concentration of demand on the globalized brands, also in the art world, on the branded artist, because it is not without reason that they are called, and on the other hand, that new work, the emerging artists, find it more difficult to assert themselves because their platforms for them are getting smaller.
And what are the prospects for the next generation of women in the art world? It means that men may have to take a back seat, and that, of course, means a loss of power. Of course, it means a challenge to a system that is male-dominated to basically curtail itself. But of course, the question is, where do we want to go? Where do we, as a society, want to go? At some point, it's not about ego and power. It's really about fairness.